Hello, everybody. I'm Stephen Brenner, Technical Director here at the Morton Theater, and welcome to the next edition of our Green Room series. Today's special guest is Joe Meadows. Joe worked for a stint here with us as the Assistant Tech Director, and then he has a lot of other interesting things he's done in his audiovisual career, and that's why we've got him here to talk.
Glad to be here, Stephen. Thank you for having me.
Cool. That's great. Love that voice. So I gave you a little intro there, but I know that there's a lot of things that you've done in your AV career. Tell me a little bit, I guess, how did you even get started in AV? Like, go back to the beginning, kind of set the scene for us.
So, somewhere about 10 years ago, I found myself in Athens working retail and building houses and doing a lot of carpentry and construction work, really not having a place where I could use skill sets, learn anything. I was on a roof of a house. I was felting it, and the carpenter that I was with got a call from the business agent out here at the Classic Center here in Athens, and he said, "We need some folks to load some trucks." The carpenter said, "Are you interested?" And I said, "Anything to get me off of this roof." Ironically, I work at heights almost all the time now, but that's where that started. I went as a truck loader and got the tap to come inside and learn the craft, and it just grew from there.
And so you alluded to it, but you said you work up high. Tell us about that. What exactly are you alluding to that you do? What's it called?
Currently, I am a freelance uprigger. So I work at heights and a lot of arenas, stadiums, outdoor events. I do a lot of film, different things like that. Anything that's working at height that has something hanging below. So lights, sound, anything that's above you. I'm the safety guy. I'm the guy who hangs it, clears it, calls it off. There are downriggers that also, help us with the math, help us put it exactly where it needs to be, get everything in check. But I'm the guy who actually goes up there and does the walk.
What's the highest you've ever been, or a facility that you've been in that maybe got to your nerves at first, and you kind of had to conquer that fear a little bit? Because I mean, some people are naturally inclined to, they don't have as great a fear of heights, but you and I have talked, we've been friends for a long time. Like, tell me about an experience you had where, like, you went to an arena for the first time and, it was a little daunting.
So back when I started, it was far different from it is now. The first time that I ever walked a beam, there weren't safeties. I went to a venue in a city, which I will not name, and I was told to go to the top. I brought my harness all the way to the top. I was really excited. I got there, and the rigger said, "You won't be needing that harness." And he closed the door, which locks from the outside. And then he rushed to the ground to tell me to hurry up. So I was being thrown into the fire that way. It was free walking, or ghost walking, some people call it. So I got burned in really quick that way. The second that I went over the catwalk onto the beam, my body froze. And I found this phenomenon to be true of almost everyone. I generally set a timer on my watch for a new person. If they don't take that second step within the first 10 minutes, I send them down. They can try again later. But if they take that second step, they'll probably be all right. Now it's much different. The venue that I was mentioning has safeties in it now. Most venues do, and the ones that don't are liable to have a fine. But
Gotcha.
It was a little bit different back then.
So it's an understatement to say the kind of work that you do is extremely dangerous.
Extremely.
Gotcha.
With proper safety measures, you can minimize that by most of it.
Gotcha.
But there's a certain trust that's given to the other people that are up there with you, because they're the ones who will have to save you. So they have to have a certain skill level, a certain do or die mentality, and they have to be strong-minded individuals.
So once you get past that, initial fear, you find it easy to focus in on the task. And, you alluded to, you have people who are on the ground referred to as downriggers, and they're setting the things that you're going to hang are called points, right? Where you go and you're dropping things on the beams. All of this is extremely scientific. All the load balances have been calculated.
Yes.
It's not just folks drawing on a bar napkin. Although that does happen, there's a lot of math and science that's taken place prior to you getting up in the air. So once you've gotten past that initial fear, talk to me a little bit about focusing on the task at hand, and how do you communicate with folks on the ground? How do you communicate with fellow riggers who are up in the air?
There's a certain amount of inexplicable adrenaline that puts horse blinders on you. So, to some extent, naturally, you're just going for the next thing, and you're paying attention to just that. Typically, the process is they will do the math on the ground below, and they will get within a couple inches of where you should hang a point, to hang multiple points to hang something below.
Gotcha.
And I'll go there. I'll let my rope in. They tie me on. I pull it up, and then I have to set it on the beam or wherever in a manner that's safe. And then once I've set it, they will further check it. They'll check the point to make sure that everything's in line. And so it's a collaborative effort between the air and the ground. In the old days, we used to yell at each other. Now it's mostly radios.
They can be that precise from the ground to get a point within inches of where it goes. So there's not a whole lot of guesswork that's going on when you're up there.
Within half an inch.
Wow.
And in fact, the production manager is talking with the rigger, the tour rigger, weeks before they show up at your venue. And that tour rigger is sending a plot to your head rigger in your city, who is then doing out the math in your venue before you show up.
So that plot goes ahead. It's all been, because these shows tour, so they have to be adaptable to each venue that they go into. So all these venues have to be built in such a way as to withstand all the loads that are being put on them.
Which is why some venues won't have certain shows, because certain shows will be too heavy. And in essence, every show is going to fit within a certain diameter. It's going to fit within a certain space.
Right.
So within that space, you can have an arena that's twice as wide. You can have an arena that just fits it. You can have an arena that has beams that are 15 feet apart or 20 feet apart. It's your job to figure out how to hang it at this height within this space.
Right. So that head rigger gets that rigging plot where all those points have been predetermined where they're going to go. And then that head rigger for that particular venue has to then make sure that show is adaptable to the venue.
Yes, and anything that's anywhere close to being overweight for the building, the head rigger will talk to the engineer. They'll talk to building management, and they'll figure all of that out before any trucks show up.
Right, because we have to work within, I guess, safe working load limits, they call them. So those beams, it's funny, if you don't come from an engineering background, I don't, but to think about, the structures over our head are built not just to support the weight of the structure itself, they're built to support other loads. And specifically, these buildings are designed to do just that, because that's what they exist for.
And consistently.
Yeah.
Not just for one time, but over many, many, many times.
Yeah, so those stresses are put on those structures over and over. And then, I'm sure there's a lot of maintenance that goes on, like you're talking about building engineers and designers probably are coming back, just like there's bridge safety and things like that. Any of those structures that are over our head, there's a lot of steps that are taken to ensure people's safety. We know the one organization we all love to talk about, but it keeps us safe, is OSHA. And, our field, your field specifically, is very much regulated by those things as well. So let me backtrack just a little bit. So you talked a little bit about the safety equipment that you wear. For somebody who's not familiar with all that, maybe they've never climbed a mountain or done any kind of hiking or anything like that. Tell us a little bit about, just the normal gear. Like, is this gear that the venue provides? Is it gear that you have to put money into? Where do you buy this stuff? How often you got to replace it? That kind of thing.
Well, sometimes a venue will provide some of the gear. As a freelancer, you don't really want to trust that because you want to trust something that you are going to inspect yourself. Other riggers that are with you, that's the last step, is that you have them check off your harness. Generally, the bare minimum for me is a 5-point harness, which has a sternal attachment so that I can rappel or that someone can save me if I'm hung by the dorsal attachment and I've fallen. Mm-hmm. Has 2 side attachments for tools and anything else, and is connected not just by the waist like traditional mountain climbing and like cellular tower harnesses, but also has a strap over the shoulders so that I can hang, I can be turned upside down, and I'm still safe.
Wow.
And we have 2 lanyards as opposed to the old system of 1 lanyard, so that if I'm making a crossing point, I can be safetied into one side and transition to the next without ever having been fully unsafetied. Normally, before it was get to the next point, unsafety the one lanyard, move it over, if you even had a lanyard.
So I know what a lanyard is, but I try to be really explicit. So tell us, what is a lanyard?
A lanyard is, now it's going to be a coil of steel that's to a certain length, and it has a hook on the end so that you can hook it to any sort of safety, whether that's rat line, which is like a steel rope that's running across, or whether it's a rope line or anything like that. So you'll hook that in, and should you fall, it should break apart in multiple stages to break your fall, and so that you're not having shock impact.
Because I know I sat in a class with Bill Sapsis, the rigging
Here
company.
in Athens.
Yeah, he came here to Athens. Bill Sapsis, one of the best riggers in the world, has a great company up north. But he was talking about like that fall arrest system and the shock load that our bodies can take. It's not very much. Like you talked, it's not physically breaking apart, but in other words, it's kind of like the crash impact of a vehicle, right? I mean, it's absorbing that energy in stages.
Correct.
Like rocket boosters or something like that. And it's, what is it like? There's a maximum fall that you can take, right? As an individual, and it's considered safe.
Most lanyards don't go beyond 6 feet. They don't recommend it because beyond 6 feet, you're multiplying that force factor.
Right. And like, let's be clear, like even if you survive that fall, it stops you from instant death, but your body can still take some injury. Like you're not out of the woods if
not
you
only
fall.
can it take injury, but you depending on the type of harness that you have, you can start losing blood, and you need to be rescued as soon as possible.
So I think it's a given to say that you don't this is not the kind of job you do on your own, right?
No, you always want at least one other qualified person to be there with you that can save you.
Gotcha. on a big show that, let's say you're working in a larger arena, what would be like the average number of points that you as a crew you would have to hang, and how big would that crew be? Maybe how many are in the air versus how many people are on the ground?
A typical large arena show is going to be anywhere from 100 to 180 points.
Wow.
In Atlanta, State Farm used to be Phillips Arena, but State Farm Arena, I think the largest show of 2019 had about 200 points. And for a show like that, you're going to have about 50 riggers, maybe 25 in the air, 25 on the ground. Not necessarily a 1-to-1 ratio, but enough people to get that up within the time limit, because that show most of the time has to happen today, tonight.
So you're rolling in to that venue and getting all those points set and everything up in the air the day the show is happening.
Sometimes you'll have a pre-rig, which is the day before. If it's something that they're a little bit worried about, they want to run everything. They want to test everything. They want to go through a full run before they ever have audience in there. Riggers show up always first. So riggers show up, you get some points hung, and then the stagehands can come in and start working on the ground and start getting things set. But you want to not only have a head start on things, but you want to have people under you for as little time as possible.
You know, if we put a GoPro up in the air and we watched, you know, a setup from beginning to the time it's all installed and ready to go for the show, it would look a little bit like organized chaos, like ants on an anthill, right?
Yes.
But to us, it's very much a choreographed movement, and there's a lot of communication.
It takes a village.
Yeah,
It takes a head of every department to know where they fit into the schematic, where they fit into this work schedule, and to stay out of the way of other people and work with them when they can.
right.
Carpenters, you know, my stage is ready by this time so that electricians can have their lights up by this time, so that riggers should have already set these things so that it can be flown out, you know, taken into the sky and be ready by showtime.
And all of this is just so that me, as the average concert goer, can come and sit down and enjoy a 2 or 3 hour show. So that start to finish process, let's say on a typical we'll call it move in, load in. What's your normal window of time as a rigger? You come in and you've got X number of hours to get, say, these 150 points hung.
Typically, unless they've allotted more time, I want to be done within 5 hours. You know,
5 hours.
Rigging is especially physical, especially in the higher venue that you get. Typically, motor chain, which is what you're hanging things off of, is about 1.5 pounds per linear foot.
Wow.
So you multiply that by 100 feet, 130 feet, and then you add in
The weight of the motor itself.
the weight of the motor itself and all of that. So you're going to get people that are getting physically fatigued.
Right.
So if you want to go longer than that, you might want to swap some folks out, have some new fresh people coming in. I've definitely had shows that have gone 8 hours plus, but typically you want to be out within 5 hours.
Because the demand on your body.
Not only the demand on your body,
your
but
mind,
everybody else, every other crew they're ready to go. They're
Right.
ready to set things up.
And
They want this done.
Yeah, so you're the first in, you know, a
And-
lot of times the last out. So yeah, you've got an army of people who are waiting for you to, quote, get out of the way.
Well over 100 generally.
Right. So not every show goes smooth. We know that. So talk to me a little bit about, like, we've talked a little bit about the inherent dangers and kind of some of the mental prep. You know, what's a typical scenario that can happen up in the air, and talk to me a little bit about how you use your problem solving skills to get it right.
Okay, the most typical situation that's a problem per se is that you've got something that has to hang here, but you have an obstacle. You have some sort of physical impediment that's not going to let you. And how do you solve that? Whether it's this is a dead hang, which means that it's going to hang from one point. Do I need to turn that into a bridle where it hangs from 2 points and then goes down where I need it to? That's the most common thing. And how do I solve that? Do I need to pick it off? You know, breast it to the side, or do I need to go down there and fix it myself? Is it hung up? Is it fouled? You know, are the shackles, which is mostly what I'm working with, are they all in line? Is everything ready to go for this to hang exactly here?
Right. So, like, what he's talking about here a little bit is, you know, you need to hang something in a certain point where there is no structure to hang to. So you have to, in that plan, hang to the nearest point and then talk about how you're going to share that weight. So a dead hang is where the load hangs directly underneath the point, right? That point is bearing all that weight. A bridle can be from multiple points. A lot of times it's a 2-point bridle, but there are 3-point bridles, and each of those legs holds a different ratio of the total weight. It's really pretty fascinating when you get all down to it. But every one of those pieces that you're working with, it has a rating on it. You have to read things. You have to be familiar. So talk to me a little bit. You said, you have your safety gear, you have the lanyard. What kinds of tools do you take up in the air with you? Like, would a typical uprigger need to have as part of their arsenal?
Typical arena rigger that's starting out is just going to need about 100 feet of rope, of poly rope. So they don't want really static because they're not going to be rappelling. They just want something that's comfortable to pull with and has the right length. That and your harness is about all you need as an intro.
Got it.
And of course, your lanyard. As you go along, you'll gain other skills and you'll need other things. The first next thing I would say is a sheave, which is a type of pulley, so that if you are physically unable to pull something to the point that you need it to, you can set a pulley above it. And, if you have to, set a redirect pulley, a sheave, far off to where somebody else can pull that for you. And then they bring it to you, you can set it and call it clear.
So that sheave is a temporary pulley that then mechanically helps shift that load so that it makes it easier to get it into the air.
Or just changes the point of where you're pulling at.
Gotcha.
So if I can't pull from here and hold that weight, mechanically somebody else can, or I can from there.
That direction gets changed.
After that, you're going to want something like a Rescue 8. Oh, well, old school people are going to want a Rescue 8. A lot of people now are going to want IDs, which are industrial descenders. I have one. I use them on the job so that you can descend down if you need to save somebody, or if there's a problem there, or if you just have to work at something while hanging. And you're going to want, for that, you're going to want a static rope. So something to hold you there that has a core to it. So it's not going to burn out no matter how fast you go. And then you're going to want a second rope that's your safety. So one that's hanging to the piece of equipment that we call it is an ASAP. But it's going to move with you just like a seat belt. And if you have any sort of jolting force, it's going to stop.
What do you call it? Industrial descender? So
Industrial descender. And I'm using brand names now. So those are Petzl items.
So just to start out with, though, just your safety and the rope, but then like with any other career, the more specialized you get or the longer you stay in it, there are tools to the craft that make things a little bit easier. So we talked about, the process of getting a show in, shows over. Talk to me a little bit about like getting that show out, and then, you work freelance. So that means that your next paycheck is never guaranteed. So you're selling yourself, you're getting your skill set known, and you're moving within a crowd of people. Talk to me a little bit, because it is a lifestyle that some people are not familiar with. So talk to me a little bit about that side of it. Like, how do you manage your career, grow your career, that kind of thing?
Well, when I started, I was doing what they call the Chitlin circuit here in the South, which is it's Athens. Athens is one of the cities. There's Columbus. There's Opelika, Alabama. All these little cities to get my name out there more, and then be proficient when I came to Atlanta, to the big city. So by then, you can freelance from city to city, get your name known, and then if you're doing a travel route, you can pretty much call up any business agent that's out there and say, hey, I see you have a show this day and I'm available. Do you need me? And if not, then you plan for the next city over who also knows you.
Gotcha.
So you can, within a year or two's time, you can, if you're good, you can put your name out there like that. And it is a lifestyle because it's sort of nomadic at first. Now, in big cities like Atlanta, you can actually make all of your earnings there, and
Right.
you can stay local. And some people like to travel more. Some people like day rates and per diems, and to some extent you can start touring after that.
Right.
That's touring light.
So you started out, like you said, on this Chitlin circuit. in sports it'd be like, being in AAA ball or something like that, right? And then you work yourself up to the majors. And you said you referred to like a time frame of about a year or two. So from cold start to, getting into the industry and feeling competent that you could bill yourself out as an uprigger, you'd say that's a fair assessment. Like, I know you have to put in the work, you have to put in the time to build your skill set, but that year or two, if you're out there and you're really getting it hard, you feel like that's an adequate enough time to at least get your feet in the door.
As a rigger, yes, but I would give the precursor to that you will need some stagehand experience before that. There are a couple riggers that have not been a stagehand prior, and I feel like it's their loss for it because they don't understand necessarily the things that they're hanging. They haven't been in the position of the person below them.
Right.
So they can do basic things like they can, pull a point up and they can hang it, but anything more complicated than that, they're at a loss.
So you would recommend maybe, somebody who would want to work into a career as an uprigger wants to start on the ground as a stagehand, which is, in our terminology, it's a generalist, right? So if you're a hand on stage, you're going to do things like just moving gear on and off stage. You may require some general AV knowledge, how to hook up microphones or, hang drops on a batten or something like that. Do you feel like that helps to set that person up for a greater amount of success when they're up in the air? Just
Absolutely.
having that general knowledge of, I always refer to as like, you got to know the scope that you're dealing with of the work, right? You walk into a ballroom or arena and you go, okay, everybody, this is the plan. This is what we're trying to accomplish. When it's all said and done, here's what we're going after. And then folks over here, riggers, this is your piece. Audio people, here's your piece. Carpenters, here's your piece. And then everybody goes out and divides and conquers.
Yeah, and it gives you a wider knowledge of the craft itself. And you can talk to the head carpenter or the head electrician or props or whatever, and you can communicate with them based on their needs. And it's a lot more head up than neck down.
Right. So as a rigger, it sounds like you within the stage world, you're interacting with a lot of different positions and skill sets of people that are depending on you doing your job right. So, you're hanging speakers, so you're working with audio people. You can be hanging truss or battens or things like that. So you're dealing with lighting folks, or you may be dealing with carpenters and scenery. Anything, like you said, that goes over the top of somebody's head and is used within a production. So, just knowing bits and pieces about what that other person is having to deal with, the challenges that they have, and the way they communicate. Because all of this comes, you've thrown some lingo out there that I follow you, even though I don't consider myself an uprigger. Coming from a lighting and sound background, I can communicate the basics. I can talk a little bit of your language, but tell me a little bit about that. How hard was it to kind of get in and like, you talk about a rat line, or there's all kinds of slang that comes along with this business. So what's some really funny or things that when you look back and you go, oh, that's curious. Why did we call that? Or when somebody said that phrase, you went like, what the is that?
That's one that I don't know off the top of my head. But what I will say is, again, back when I started, it was a much different experience. Getting in it's not like it is now. Now you can have a series like this from the Morton where you learn about the craft. You can go down to your business agent at whatever local that you're at, and you can start just by applying. Back then, it was much more word of mouth. It was, who likes you, who doesn't. Not necessarily a popularity contest, but it was harder to get in, and I think we're better off for where we're moving now.
But this is still not necessarily a craft like that you can, say, pursue through a college course. You might be able to go to school for the mechanics or the engineering, that kind of thing, certainly, but very much still an apprentice-style learning situation.
Absolutely.
Where I'm learning from somebody who has decades of experience.